So today we have talked about the agenda, the ischemia trial. That was some discussion that we had earlier. That was last week. Again, we've done other videos on it. You'll see more information on it soon. Today, we're going to talk about errors. I made believe it or not, made a couple of errors last week. As most of you know, I make errors all the time. We'll cover a couple of them just for clarification. We're going to talk about NDMA. That's going to be the major announcement topic for today. It's a nitrosodimethylamine. It's a big word. Bottom line is it's a poison. It's one of the reasons that a lot of the ARBs, losartan, some of the others were taken off the market for a while. The FDA has been monitoring medications for NDMA, and they're currently monitoring metformin. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Orlando event and some of the holiday sales and webinars. So first, about the errors. Last week, I called verapamil an ACE inhibitor. Why I did that, I don't know. I've got some ideas. Number one, it ends in IL, and I think maybe I was gearing on that. But no, verapamil is also a blood pressure medicine, but it's a calcium channel blocker. I made another error, vitamin K2 in international units like vitamin D3. No, that's not correct. It's in milligrams or micrograms. James, I would say, look, I need a fact checker, and somebody please help. That's exactly what James Cantor did last week, and I still didn't listen. So again, thank you for your patience. I think the major underlying message is that we try to get a lot of information out there. We try to do a lot in terms of quality checks, and the reality is that even multi-million-dollar organizations like the New York Times and New England Journal have errors. So I just wanted to make sure that we notified and provided clarification. Why 2 videos and 1 error? A little bit of explanation. Well, there's a madhouse on prep for YouTube Live. You've probably seen that in the other YouTube Live events as well. Unless the person is coming from a YouTube Live or a technology video perspective, the video things here don't play well together. Even for this event, we had GoToWebinar. No, it wasn't. A Zoom webinar, and YouTube did something different that they've never done on us before. We figured it out, but again, that's what caused us to be late. So there's a madhouse getting ready for these events. My daughter, by the way, just came home, so I had to run see her real quick, and that pushed us back in terms of getting ready. Last week, I was on hour 40 of a 48-hour water fast. Anyway, thank you again for your patience. I've made other big errors in the past. One of them was in the video that I never took down. One of my original videos on niacin, I called it vitamin D3. So again, buyer beware. Understand where errors can occur. We've gone back and corrected those in terms of the captioning, but you can't really make significant edits on a video once it's up and rolling. We had so many views on it, so many people were watching it. We felt it was better to put the corrections in the captions. So metformin and NDMA, you may have heard about it. Chris in our shop made me aware this morning by email, and I had not heard of it. I'd been in New York for the past week with my family, and took a look. It's an interesting story. Again, NDMA is a nitrosodimethylamine. What can it cause? If you look over here on the right, a short term, a very high dose can cause liver injury, and it's caused death. Very, very high doses. But what we're really looking at more from a practical basis for today is chronic, very low dose The FDA is looking at that right now. This is not the first time they've looked at NDMA in medications. You may remember that they pulled Zantac because of the of NDMA. Losartan, the other ARBs, a very, very popular blood pressure medication, class of medications. And there's even been associations with drinking water. In terms of poisoning incidents, there Wikipedia will list 3, one in Ulm, Germany, where a teacher poisoned himself and his wife. They died from liver failure. Fudan, again, so the poisoning incidents were very high doses, one-time doses that, again, resulted in the liver injury. Omaha, Nebraska, all of these were either on purpose. Well, they were on purpose. One of the medical student in Fudan, Japan, claimed it was a joke. Obviously a bad one. Now, all of this sounds terrible. Should everybody quit taking metformin? I'm not stopping my metformin, and the FDA's already come out with an explanatory statement. They don't recommend it either. In fact, they don't recommend any changes in terms of metformin practice, whether you're taking it for preventive reasons or to actually help you control moderate to more severe levels of diabetes. Again, I would clearly agree with the FDA on the issue that I do not personally see a need to change. I'm not changing my recommendations. Now, one of the other things you need to think about with folks on this channel and in more of a preventive practice, most of us that are taking it, myself included, are not taking it because of so much for need of metformin to control full-blown diabetes, taking it more for moderate insulin resistance, which I have, or even preventive needs. With a medication like that, I would also agree with David Sinclair. He recommends taking a vacation on medicine. I'd recommend taking vacations on most medicines. Now, a lot of docs would push back with me on that, but a lot of them wouldn't. So bottom line, no recommendations for any change regarding metformin. Just a couple of other points. Just if you'll go to the membership page, we have updated that. We've got an event. The event in Louisville was very successful. One of the most successful parts of the Louisville event, by the way, was not so much our presentations and our management. We did better than we had feared. We were very pleased, very excited about it. But the biggest thing about the Louisville event was people coming and making some of their own presentations. We had 3 folks that had been patients and participants for over a year and had dealt with significant challenges in terms of their own health, their own plaque, their own insulin resistance problems. One of them, for example, you've seen a couple of videos maybe on Chuck. Chuck Smith got up and told his story about losing 50 pounds on a vegan diet. And then after that, having an event, a heart attack. And he says, by the way, the term event just does not give full meaning to the experience at all. Chuck was driving home from the gymnasium where he had been working out when it happened. He had a Tesla. So he let the Tesla drive him while he was fumbling in the back seat getting some nitro. Anyhow, he's got a great story to tell. After the event, he realized that he was taking too many carbs. He had a problem with insulin resistance. He noticed my channel, probably Ivor Cummins'. A lot of people are noticing both of these channels regarding insulin resistance and its impact. At that time, he noticed his triglyceride over HDL was 5. After changing his diet completely and getting back into more of a low carb type of diet, he got his triglyceride over HDL ratio down to less than 1. So Great story. Now, again, back to the Louisville event. What happened was people began to realize you don't have to be a doc who's trained in this and had a career in it. You can be a patient. You can be somebody who does something else for a living. You can learn what you need to learn and overcome significant challenges and protect your health. Add another couple of healthy, non-disabled decades to your life. So that was the biggest part of the event. We're going to have another one. In case you missed that one, it's going to be in Orlando, February 28th. So if you go to the membership page, we've updated that. I didn't have time because of the last minute rush to give you an updated picture, but it's all on the membership page. So I am going to back out of that now, and we'll deal with a few comments. Bart Robinson, good morning, Doc. Good morning, Bart. Guy blind without, yes. 170 degrees west. Just wondering if I missed a memo or something. No, you didn't. You didn't miss it. Bob Weiss, Georgia Mountains. Thank you, Bob, for joining us. Clyde. Good morning, Clyde. James Cantor. You're welcome, Dr. Brewer. Thanks. And thank you again, James, for your help, your fact checking, and your patience when I didn't even have the sense to listen. Mr. Whiteley, question. In one of your videos, I saw your continuous blood glucose monitor got to 150 after a vigorous workout. That's a great point, Mr. Tully. Is that normal? I am only seeing a 10-ish point jump on my workouts. You know, it's interesting, Mr. Tully. So he's talking about, I don't have one on today. He's talking about the Freestyle Libre continuous glucose monitor. There's another one, the Dexcom 6, and I did a comparison, a head-to-head comparison, and I've got a video about that. We published it, I think, about a month ago. Most people like and think the Dexcom 6 is better. It's a lot more expensive, and I didn't get any better results with it. But here's back to your question, Mr. Tully. You know, it's very interesting. I used the Libre, gosh, I don't know, I probably used it 6 or 7 times, maybe more last year. And we'll use it again every couple of months this year. What's an interesting point is that I never had that bump. I know a lot of my patients have. You go out, you do a workout, and you get a significant bump or increase in your blood sugar. I never had that until about 6 months ago. And you're right, on the video, I did show that. And for some reason, my metabolism changed. My glucose metabolism in that specific area changed. And now it's fairly reliable. I will get that spike up to like 150 just from going over to the YMCA across the street and doing a workout. Some people don't, a lot of people do. And what does it mean? Well, it's clearly not something that would discourage me from working out or recommending a workout for other people. It tends to go up maybe an hour at most. And again, we're not talking about levels of 200 or 300. We're talking about 150 for an hour when you're doing a workout. Now, let's go back and ask the question, why? Well, when you do a vigorous workout, you're usually going to get some epinephrine or adrenaline. Well, epinephrine or adrenaline causes the liver to take glycogen, which is nothing but stored glucose, one glucose after another, after another, after another. Epinephrine and cortisol does this on a long-term basis, stimulates the liver to start chopping those glucose molecules off of that glycogen storage molecule in the liver and releasing it into the blood. So that's how you can get significant increases in blood sugar even without eating. Now, where do those hormones come from? Both of them come from the adrenal glands. And again, both of them are more like fight or flight. Adrenaline or epinephrine is very much fight or flight. It's the short-term hit. But cortisol is more like a long-acting adrenaline or epinephrine. Speaking of cortisol, it's one of our, I think one of the big challenges associated with insulin resistance. And by the way, cortisol is usually very much associated with what we call the dawn effect, D-A-W-N. That's where a lot of people, about 20%, will get a significant increase in blood sugar before they take anything in the morning. And that's associated with the fact that almost all of us have we have a daily or circadian rhythm for cortisol. And cortisol tends to peak for most of us at 4, 5, 6 in the morning. That's what leads to the dawn effect and increase in blood sugar, which happens in a lot of folks. Now, most of the people that I deal with as patients that do have dawn effect, get overly concerned about it. Dawn effect usually, it doesn't, like this exercise, the post-exercise bump in blood sugar, dawn effect usually doesn't go up to like 200 or more. It tends to go up like even less than an exercise bump, like 110, maybe 120. I've seen a few of them at 120, but most of them are in the low 100s. But people do get concerned about it, and there are ways to manage dawn effect. Pardon me if I went off in too many directions, Mr. Tully, but I wanted to draw some connections, and I appreciate you raising it. It was a great question. Laura Rance, good morning from Texas. Good morning from Kentucky. Thanks for letting us know where you're from. Thomas Rooney, any plan to have an event out west? You know what? We considered having one out west a couple of months ago. David Meintz did have a CIMT access event. Most of David's are short half-day to one-day events, and they're mostly focused on general prevention and nutrition. But thank you again, Thomas. You're reminding me. I do hope to have one. It may be this summer. Mike Rubbershooten. Heard about dihydroberberine lately being touted as substantially better absorption assimilation ratios than regular berberine. Your thoughts? No thoughts. No air in the windmills of my mind on that issue, Mike. I have not heard about that yet. It's very interesting. Berberine and berberine's getting a lot more press recently, so very interesting. Clyde, one thing I would ask, I was getting ready to ask, Clyde, if you would post the schedule for the events. And those of you who are watching, I think you can see the comments. Clyde's got them there. February 28th, Orlando. February 8th, Birmingham, Alabama. That's a David Meintz event with, again, just a one-day prevention and CIMT. February 15th, San Antonio. That's also David Meintz. April 4th in Detroit, David Meintz. And April 17th in Central Western Ohio. That's one of our events, and we will we'll be presenting to a couple of local dental societies, and they've agreed that folks can come in from the YouTube channel if you'd like. April 25th, Rochester, New York. That's David Meintz event, and May 2nd in Memphis, also a David Meintz event. Thomas Rooney, so far, these are the locations we'll be having the event. Yeah, again, Thomas, we are looking to get something out west. And you may have missed it. We did have a CIMT event in Anaheim, LA, a couple of months ago. Had about, 3 dozen people attend that. Thurston Howell III, good morning. I don't know if you've got, those of you who may not recognize the name, I used to watch a lot of Gilligan's Island, and I think I don't know if you've got the same name or if I'm misremembering Thurston Howell's name, or if you've actually got internet access out on Gilligan's Island. Erland FR, Erland from Chicago here. Good morning, Dr. B. Good morning to you, Erland. We've got some others that I think I missed up here. Mr. Totally. Oh, I noticed a 10-point. So James Cantor was acknowledging, I noticed a 10-point increase in my blood sugar after exercise by finger stick. James, if I am correct, I think you've shared, you're pretty advanced in your insulin resistance status. If you if you are and you're willing to share, please let us know. My question from Mr. Tully. My CIMT said my arteries are age 26. I am 41. Well, congratulations to you. That's a great thing to have. One thing I would ask is who did it, and have you gotten more than one to confirm that? I am overweight, so I called the lab to see if it is normal to get a young age when you have a CIMT at 40. How fast can a CIMT change? Now, it's not quote normal, end quote. It's good. So for example, we had what, 3 dozen at the Louisville event. I think we had 2 with people that had IMT ages 10 years or younger than their, or arterial ages 10 years younger than their regular age. Basically, what you do is you have what we call nomograms, and you compare the width of the IMT on the nomogram. And yes, some people do not put their metabolism is such that they're not putting a lot of LDL, oxidized LDL, in their artery walls in between the intima and media layers. So that's a good thing. Now, is that totally correlated with risk? No, there are several things that we look at on a CIMT, and one of them has to do with what we call a discrete plaque. That's a section or an area where you get more than a 1.3 millimeter thickness. We also, there are ways to look at it. What the 2 big ones are IMT, the age, the arterial age, and the other one is mean max. And the mean max is taking those discrete plaques, the 1.3 and above, averaging out the top 6 to see how much overall discrete plaque burden you have. There are a couple of others as well, and Todd puts a couple of those on his program at Cardio Risk. Okay, so Mr. Tully, my CIMT event was done at the Anaheim event. I have only had one. Well, again, the Anaheim event was a high quality CIMT, so that's very interesting and good for you. I would want to get a confirmation at some point 6 to 12 months later to confirm that your numbers are looking good like that. Congratulations, and I am jealous. My artery age, I just had mine at the Louisville event, and it was like mid 50s, and I'm 62, so I'm close there too. Just so you know, one of my most watched video is where I got my first CIMT. It was 20 years older than I was. That was out at a Bale-Donine event in Vegas almost 10 years ago. And over a couple of year period, I made some adjustments. One of them being I started statins. I finally bit the bullet and agreed to start a statin. You will often get significant decrease in that when someone has never taken statins before and they will start them. But I made some other adjustments as well. I lost another 5 to 10 pounds, went low carb, again, made a few other adjustments. James Cantor, I've had diabetes for just under 2 years. I thought you had, but again, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share that. So, and that helps people understand. I don't know for sure whether there's a pattern of tending to see that post-exercise or exercise bump in blood sugar. I don't know if that's really associated with level of diabetes and how far you've traveled down that pre-diabetes highway. but it's interesting to know and very helpful. Laura Rance, I went low carb and reversed my diabetes in 4 months. My A1C was 15 and now it's 5. Why would my blood pressure be high? Well, first of all, before reacting to your blood pressure question, I've got to say that's an amazing jump. I've had patients come to me that had hemoglobin A1Cs that high, and it's like, oh, that's huge in terms of creating significant damage for your arteries. Actually, one of the ones that came in a couple of years ago had it's a gross description. It's called a necrotizing fasciitis. The skin in an area of his body just started melting away because of damage to the artery walls. He did get down to a hemoglobin A1C of 7, but to get down to an A1C of 5, that's amazing. Congratulations. Keep it up. Don't stop. Now, why would my blood pressure be high? There are 3 or 4 things to say about blood pressure. Number one, they tend to call it essential or idiopathic, which means in doctor medical speak, they don't really know what's causing high blood pressure. Now that's the standard, and most of us, there are different things that can cause high blood pressure, but the vast majority of high blood pressure is what we call idiopathic or essential. Now, does that really mean that we don't know what causes it? No, there's a lot of things that we know go on. One of them, you'll notice that high blood pressure goes along with insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, being overweight, age. So there are some correlations there. One of the more common mechanisms for developing high blood pressure that I'm aware of in terms of the science is also called AGE, advanced glycation end products. So for example, Laura Rance mentioned that her hemoglobin A1C went from 15 down to 5. Hemoglobin A1C is glycated hemoglobin. It's where the blood sugar, as the blood sugar gets high, it actually binds to proteins. Hemoglobin is a protein. So that's actually how we measure people's, one of the ways that we measure people's glucose response and how long it's been over the 3-month period that population of red blood cells has been in the blood. Well, those proteins that have been glycated also can jam up some of the sensors in the filters of the kidney. It's pre and post glomerular, if you want to get technical, and I choose not to. So there are some filters or some sensors pre and post filter in the kidneys. As you may remember, each kidney is about 1 million filters. And what a filter is it's filtering blood through the intima, the lining of the artery wall. Well, if those sensors get clogged, they tell the brain and the body that we're not getting enough fluid through these filters. So therefore, we want you to increase the blood pressure, usually by increasing the amount of fluid. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of physiology 101 associated with blood pressure. Now, does that stuff all reverse when you reverse your diabetes? Well, impact on things like kidneys, yes, it does. Actually, I did a video on that, but that was like 2 years ago. The bottom line on reversing kidney disease, even though it does, is it takes months to years to get. It's a very, very slow process to reverse impact on the kidney. Erland, per your advice, I tried metformin. It made me terribly sick. I stuck it out for 3 weeks without getting used to it, so I dropped it. Do you have advice on how to tolerate metformin? Yeah, the bottom line is there are some people, but it's less than 1% of the gene pool that do have a genetic predisposition where they cannot tolerate metformin. And usually that's due to gastrointestinal problems. For up to 20% of us, when we first start metformin, we can get a little bit of gas, uh, uh, mostly a little bit of gas, sometimes a little bit of diarrhea. Usually when somebody in that 20%, what we'll have them do is split the pill, back off, and take like, um, instead of 500, 250 or even less per day for a few weeks. Usually the vast majority of that 20% can get used to it. One of the things that we've found is that metformin actually changes the gut biome. There are gut biomes that are more associated with insulin resistance and diabetes. They have to do with fewer variety of different species of bacteria in the gut, some other things. And metformin tends to change the gut biome from more of a pre-diabetic type of mix of bacteria to more of a non-pre-diabetic mix. So that appears to be one of the mechanisms for getting used to metformin. As I said earlier, though, Erlen, some people just don't get used to it. Now, I've got several patients who said, "Yep, I still want to take it, and I can tolerate these lower levels," and they just continue to pill split. Metformin. There will be a lot of people that will debate with me over this comment I'm getting ready to make. As well, but again, take it in context, and we can debate that at some point too. Most people think you have to take metformin every day. I do tend to take my metformin most days. I take 500 twice a day. I've got significant insulin resistance, but especially for those of us with less insulin resistance, again, you don't have to take metformin every day. If you go back to David Sinclair and his comments about taking metformin, when he was taking it, he agreed that he tended to take metformin vacations, and it sounded like at least once a week he would go a day or two without taking metformin. Now, Mr. Tully, thank you for your replies. Question: there are a lot of videos describing how statins lower cholesterol. How do statins lower inflammation? Why do you only need low amounts of statins to do this? Those are both really good questions, Mr. Tully, and I don't know the answer to either one of those. I do not know the mechanisms of statins lowering inflammation. I would love to see it if someone does find some references on that. I think I might have seen a reference that got in pretty deep into some biomedical, some metabolic components, but I don't remember. I didn't get that deep into that, and it's kind of foggy in my memory anyway. It's a great question. Don't know how it's done, but it's clearly been documented. Ray Sinquigrani. Good morning, Dr. Brewer. Bob Weiss, can you address fermented foods like kefir? Sure, I'd love to. I tried kefir for a while, and I guess maybe the discussion about the gut biome maybe stimulated the question, but I stopped taking kefir and yogurt because both of them just had so many carbs in them. Kefir is it's like a yogurt, but it's you drink it. It's almost like a thick milkshake consistency. And again, the fermented foods are great, but do you have to get a load of carbs with your fermented foods? There've been a couple of companies that do low carb. For example, there's Carb Master low carb yogurt. I've never seen Carb Master low carb kefir. Kefir is just not that popular, at least in the US. It's very, very popular in Eastern Europe and Russia. I've got a friend, James West. You've seen him on a couple of videos, how he lost 40 pounds. He speaks Russian and actually lived in Russia as a oh, I'm blanking on senior moment, blanking on the name, working with a church over in Russia. And so he took a lot of kefir and still does. I don't take it so much, just like I don't take yogurt because of the carbs. I do try to get sauerkraut. And you guys on the channel actually made me aware that I was getting the wrong kind of sauerkraut. I've changed and get refrigerated sauerkraut now. And I have sauerkraut usually at least once a day. I think it's a better source for folks like me that have insulin resistance for as a probiotic. James Cantor, my advice on metformin is ER. Thank you for bringing that up, James. A lot of people do well on ER. That's the extended release. And that's one of the options, as you may remember me bringing it up a few minutes ago about the dawn effect. That's one of the options that tends to help people with the dawn effect. I think, James, you're probably talking about Erlen's comment. That's also a good option for taking if you're having some problems with GI activities. And Erlen, if you'd like for us to write that for you, we'd be happy to try that. Thomas Gronick, it's my understanding that statins stop the liver from producing cholesterol. It was also my understanding that LDL is a good thing, not bad. And in fact, statins are toxic. Well, that's a good topic, very deep topic with a whole lot of arms and legs. Here's the bottom line. Yes, there is toxicity with statins. Yes, there's just like there's toxicity with water if you drink too much of it. So why would people recommend statins? Let me just give you the brief, maybe 30-second elevator pitch on statins. So personally, I do not. I prescribe statins maybe a half to a third as often as a standard doctor would. But standard doctors are looking at LDL. I'm not, because I tend to agree with you. I have patients with significant genetic problems associated with familial hypercholesterolemia. Even most of those with these high numbers of like 180 or so, often not as concerned about that as other things going on with their body. But I still do recommend statins, and it's more for inflammation, not for managing LDL. Where did that come from? This was discovered like 20 years ago. A couple of guys, Gavin Blake and Paul Ridker, both at Harvard, noticed that whether people's LDL was high or low in these large studies, they tended to get fewer heart attacks and strokes when they were on statins. There are several studies, Wascops, West of Scotland trial. I'm blanking on the other one. But anyhow, several studies have indicated and shown that. So when will I recommend statins? If there's proven plaque and therefore proven ability for the body to be involved in this cycle of inflammation. The most common reason for inflammation being insulin resistance, but other things can cause it too, like other inflammatory diseases, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, things like that. If you look at the standards of medicine, they'll start with a guess in terms of whether to put somebody on statins. What do I mean by guess? It's got a name, Framingham. The recommendation is to start with Framingham, looking at their risk factors. Framingham's a town in Massachusetts near Boston, where they did a lot of they've done generation after generation, about 5 generations so far of heart attack and stroke chronic disease research. There were questionnaires that were developed out of Framingham. That's what the standard docs use. And based on your age, demographics, other things, they will recommend statins. Unfortunately, I use the term guess. You can call it estimate, but I say guess, and it's also a bad guess. When you look at Framingham, the most recent one's 2013. When you look at Framingham, it's based on data that's prior to 2013. And especially for women, it indicates about twice as much risk as patients actually have today. Go back, look it up. Ridker's talked about that. My guys at Hopkins have talked about that. Well-known researchers in this area all have talked about the same thing, that Framingham, the standard that most doctors use, way overestimates risk. So why don't you just go back and use the previous Framingham? Because it was worse. So again, I don't recommend statins based on risk. I recommend statins based on whether or not you have proven disease, as in plaque in your arteries. Okay, Mr. Y. Tully, ferment your own carrots. Tastes like a pickled carrot. Nice change from the sauerkraut. That is interesting. I never thought about fermenting my own carrots. My brother and my dad both made wine and sake in the past, and that was a messy event. And we don't have a basement, so I probably won't go there, but it's an interesting idea. Poll 39, is kimchi a good alternative to kefir? Yes, I think kimchi is like sauerkraut, much more made of different vegetables. Doesn't have quite as much as the partially fermented dairy products in it. So therefore it doesn't have as much carbs. But just look at the, I mean, if you're look at the container, the food label. Laura Rance, why refrigerated kraut? Well, I was taking the jarred kraut, and what they were pointing out to me is that the jarred kraut had been, I'm assuming, pasteurized, meaning they had heated it and killed the bacteria that are in there. Well, that's what we want. We want both some of the fiber from the kraut as well as the bacteria. So that's why refrigerated kraut instead of jarred kraut. Okay, we are getting on long in the tooth, closer to the hour. Handle a couple more and then we'll sign out. James Cantor, there's some Greek yogurts out there lower than 2 carbs. Yes, 2 good, 2 grams carbs. Thank you for mentioning that, James. There are Carb Masters one. There are a couple of the large brands I think have some, and then Greek yogurt tends to inherently be a little bit lower. Some of the companies have said we're going to take Greek yogurt, which is popular even though it's lower carb, and make it much lower carb. C. Lear, thanks for all you do to inform us of our risk. How often should a person have a CIMT or CAC scan? So the coronary artery scan and the CIMT are not interchangeable. A great question, by the way. The coronary artery scan looks at calcium, coronary artery calcium scan. That's what the second C stands for. So a lot of people think, well, it's an advantage because I'm actually looking at the heart. I'm not looking at arteries in the neck. Well, the problem, it's a much bigger disadvantage in that it's only looking at calcium. If you have significant soft plaque is never going to show on a calcium scan. So for multiple reasons, people talk about basically getting like 1 or 2 calcium scans, getting them maybe every 5, every 10 years. There's another reason for that. Besides the lack of information, the other reason is there is some radiation. You'll hear that. I agree with Ivor Cummins. The radiation that we're talking about, especially these days from a calcium scan, is minimal. It's nothing compared to the risk that we're trying to figure out. So I'm not worried about radiation from a calcium score. My problem is that it doesn't show soft plaque. A CIMT does show soft plaque. The downside on CIMT, as most of us know, is that it's very sensitive to the interrogation, the actual skill set of the ultrasound tech who is going in trying to make sure that he or she has gotten the best picture of those arteries. I still didn't answer your question. Sorry about that. So We usually will do a CIMT once a year. We will, by the way, in terms of other labs, we'll do an inflammation panel about once a quarter. Insulin resistance, OGTT, typically once a year. I had an interesting discussion with a patient recently, and I'm glad this came up. He came to the event and he said, "Doc, you got to see my my OGTTs." He did one a month after the event. He had done one a month before the event, and he went from blood sugar levels over 200 in the OGTT prior to the event, and got him down to like 150 or something like that, peaking a month later. Now, how did he do that? Was it a miracle? Did he walk during the thing? No, he didn't walk, and no, it wasn't a miracle. It does underline the impact that we can have on our typical blood glucose metabolism. In the first one, 2 months prior, he was ill. He had a flu. He had been traveling. Because of his traveling, this was from Brazil up to Miami, I think, to get the labs done. He had not slept. And so that, all of those things, major bursts of cortisol pushing his already known insulin resistance problem. And at the Louisville event, he heard others talk about this, and he said, "You know what? I have never tried intermittent fasting." For most people, intermittent fasting is basically skipping breakfast. He said he's going to try that. He did. He lost a few pounds without trying, lost about 5 pounds, maybe a little bit more than that, in just a couple of weeks. And so, number one, he lost 5 pounds. Number two, he did not eat carbs. We usually recommend that you eat about 150 carbs per day for 3 days prior to getting the OGTT. He did not, because again, he wanted to know what all of these things the impact all of these might have on his OGTT, his glucose metabolism, when he was doing it right. He knew that when he was doing it wrong, poor sleep, ill with the flu, travel, stress, a couple of other things, that was causing the high blood sugar levels. Again, he got it down to 150 with better sleep, no longer having the flu, losing recently over the past week or two, having lost 5 pounds and not eating carbs. So his point was, make people aware of this, help them know that you can make a big impact even on your inherent blood sugar metabolism. So thank you again for that question. Okay, Erland, can you answer my question about osteoporosis above? Sometimes these questions jump around and it scrolls on its own. All I see, Erland, is a question about, I see hello from Chicago. I see the question about metformin, and I do not see any questions about, Erland, in your practice, do you address osteoporosis and how to treat it? We don't focus that much on osteoporosis. Thank you for the question. Let me just see if there's anything else, and then we'll sign out. There's not. Thank you very much for your interest. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn this off.